What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Automated Special. Today, we are bringing the heat. What is heat exactly? Holistic enterprise automation techniques. What does that mean in plain English? I don't even know. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Pranav, who is going to fill us in exactly what bringing the heat means. Pranav, to you, sir.
Thank you very much, John. It's cold December, Christmas time, and that's why you wanted to bring in some heat
That's
to
right.
warm ourselves up. How's everybody doing?
Doing well, for sure.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've been on this automated series for gosh, like this whole year, and we've been talking about a lot of these scenarios that we've heard customers do with RPA and just automation in general. And I think over this last 6 months, we've just kind of learned a lot, and we want to share this end-to-end journey as to how does an enterprise start with an automation project? What are the key concerns they have, or key things that they should think about? How should they just go about building automation and then enabling their employees to use their automation at large? So it's really just letting the heat out and just talking about automation for real without any of the buzzwords. That's the heat part of it, at least for me. Apostles, what do you think? Where does the heat come from for you?
Absolutely. Spot on.
Yeah, I like it. I think what we're trying to do here is a special edition of Automated. We've had episodes that we've done that are very specific to one certain topic. And today, what we're trying to do is a series of videos that will bring together all of the learnings that we've gathered this year in a very usable format, where we're going to take you through a few different stages of a project, how we think you should think about it, how we think you should build it, and also deploy it and manage it, and all of those things. So I think it's just a wonderful way for us to wrap up a lot of what we've talked about in a nice, pretty bow, almost like a present.
And I believe there's some special announcements as well today, is there not?
Yeah, let's get on to our Santa special. Our Christmas came early. So we just announced a bunch of updates in the automation space. We just announced first new names. So hopefully 2021 is going to be good because of these name changes. So flows, which used to be instant flows or trigger-based flows, are now called cloud flows, kind of representing the fact that they run in the cloud. UI flows has been rebranded to desktop flows. Business process flows have not been changed. PAD or Power Automate Desktop, which was our RPA authoring client, is generally available. We have new features or new offerings which help you discover processes and easily around the process mining, process advisor space. You can monitor automation in real time, so you can get, if you're processing invoices, for each invoice that gets processed, you can have monitoring right then and there. You can optimize your automation for scale. You can share automation. You can deploy automation using automated ways. There are a lot of PAD features. A lot of actions are going into PAD. A bunch of other improvements also happened in the last month, where you can now have multiple vendor invoice formats in AI Builder. A lot of AI Builder models are now GA. We have 400 plus connectors in Power Automate. So this is growing at a fantastic pace. More integration with the admin center, so all the desktop flows analytics are available over there as well. And we have action level analytics for Cloudflow, so which step took what time and how many calls did it make. You can manage capacity for RPA. We have an RPA SAP Playbook that Apostles wrote, which sort of goes deeper into how do you build SAP automation using Power Automate Desktop. And if folks are curious, we have a lot more coming up in Q1, the first 3 months of next year. So do check out these links.
Well, that's a lot of stuff. I think
just ran a marathon in 60 seconds, I think.
You did. Holy cow. First things first, let's say this. This is the first name change that I don't hate. I'm like, wow, this makes sense. Like flow API flows to cloud flows and UI flows to desktop flows. I am 100% with it. I have not understood many of the previous name changes, but this one I'm like, yeah, I'm with you guys.
Well, it's good now. If you go to the portal now, it makes sense because now you have cloud flows, desktop flows, and business process flows, and
Yep.
team flows as the flows.
Totally.
I actually had a hard time explaining to people like flows, which kind of flows, and sort of what I'm doing over there. So yeah, like we have a very strong momentum going sort of into the end of the year, and that's one of the key reasons we wanted to do this series right around this time is because there's a lot of stuff out there. So how do you sort of make sense of all of this across the platform from an automation perspective? And I think just taking a, a real use case sort of as a baseline for to ground ourselves in. So this is a webinar that we strongly encourage all our listeners to go watch as well. It's pre-recorded, so you can sign up. It's by Coca-Cola, and it's about the story on how they went about their automation journey with Power Platform. So, like, what inspired them to pick Power Platform? In fact, the some key nuggets were like this was a demo at Ignite, the keynote by Charles, and they were like really excited to go out explore Power Virtual Agents, Power Automate RPA, Power Apps, and like in the last like 6 to 8 months, like they've rapidly built multiple bots. And they also talk about how do you think about governance, how do you think about security, and they also talk about how do you run or how do you upskill your citizen developers as well. So it's a fairly good like breadth and depth watch in terms of an enterprise or a a developer sort of driving that adoption in the company itself. So I think I'll just share sort of my sort of resetting of how what I understand the platform to be, and sort of what I've heard customers sort of ask for an approach from different perspectives. So I think we all know this, where we sit in the Power Platform family from an automation perspective, and we allow this platform for low code as a low code no code platform for citizen developers to sort of build apps, BI or chatbots, and then sort of power or automation scenarios very easily, and that they can leverage the infrastructure around connectors and AI and stuff. But what sort of is missing is, which a lot of people don't realize, is if you double click the Power Automate bucket, like this is a beast. Like this is what Power Automate gives you out of the box. Like you have a rich set of connectors that lets you connect to both on-prem data sources and cloud connectors, and you can do in the entire spectrum of automation scenarios. You can do RPA, you can do cloud flows or digital process automation, you can embed AI, you can build approvals, you can business process management flows, and then you can expose these through different interfaces, through chatbots, through apps, through portals, through tools. So it is a giant automation platform, which and these details kind of miss out when we think about the overall picture. So this was a good realization for me, just to think about how deep and how broad the automation space is from a Power Automate perspective. And if you think about just holistically from a Microsoft perspective, we are targeting both low code and pro code developers. So while the Power Apps, the Power Platform stack does enable a good story around the low code developers, there's a good story around this whole fusion concept where pro code and low code developers are working together. And this is a good example which Coca-Cola talked about is, pro code developers are developing these APIs that sit in Azure, then talk to these data services, then can be consumed by your low code developers. And then the pro code and the low code developers are using these application lifecycle management techniques with GitHub and DevOps to then sort of automate the process of reliably deploying this automation, into the production environment. So it's a very great story where it starts from this low code experience where low citizen developers can build apps and they can harness the breadth of the automation capabilities, and then work with the pro code developers to then sort of harness the power of Azure, and then sort of start building these reliable solutions that can be deployed in a reliable way. Things like using key vault and stuff. And so that's sort of the realization I had actually, over the last 6 months. I've been talking to a lot of these customers who are coming to the Power Platform for the first time. Like this is the sort of broad spectrum that the platform enables, and the story that sort of ties in very beautifully.
So I think two things. One, Pranav, who's vacuuming at your house? Number one, and number two, I think that this pro code, low code story is something that we see actually a lot. It's it's becoming a big story in our community as well, where we see a lot of this pro code, low code unite. It's a hashtag. They're talking about it. I think that the citizen developer and the pro developer story have been separate for a while, but like even now we're talking about it in corporations, but even every user out there is beginning to embrace this story as well. And it just makes sense, right? Because pro code developers, right, they have a skill set that low coders will never have. They can develop a pipeline of tools. They can give access to things. They can infrastructure, whereas low code is all about consumption, right? I need the building block there to be able to use it. And so, seeing that fusion of those two things coming together, giving people the tools that they need to fix the problems that they have where they are is paramount, right? And I think, we just heard Satya talk about it, put out a big article on this exact thing, saying if you want to scale your business to the next generation, right, low code development is the way. And I think that this story, you can't do successful low code without a great pro code base there as well, right? They're hand in hand, and one needs the other.
Yeah, I think it's long overdue, like in terms of us talking about this, because if you can improve the productivity of someone, like why wouldn't you do that? And why do you have to put a label on it? Like no one talks about, a developer inside of Microsoft Word being a pro Word developer, right? They're still using a tool and they're being productive, right? So why would we treat apps and automation any different? I think all it is sort of moving up the food chain in terms of what are we trying to democratize. And so it's great to see both the breadth of the platform and also the depth as well, as we saw on the previous slide as well.
I think, John, you hit a good point that I wanted to highlight was it's all about these Lego boxes coming together, and people have different skill sets, and a Lego box works well for a different skill set, but combined together, you can build my favorite house or my favorite car
or the Millennium Falcon.
Or the Millennium Falcon if you have a lot of time, which I think for Christmas time everybody has time. But I think going back from a customer perspective also, this is if you watch the Coca-Cola webinar, this is what you'll hear them talk about is all these Lego boxes coming together, first from a Power Platform perspective, then from an Azure perspective, and then from a Microsoft 365 perspective. And that's exactly sort of where our sweet spot is. So sort of just building upon it, and a full disclaimer, everything from this, is experimental over here. Like what we've tried to do over here is as we've worked through a bunch of different customers and we've heard a lot of feedback from, customers in terms of what's top of mind for them or what are their concerns, what are some of the gotchas that they're running into the cycle. We tried to sort of, stage the journey from an automation perspective for an organization, these following buckets, and we probably might not have gotten everything correct, so any feedback is very welcome for us to improve. But what we've realized is at a first step, there is something about empowering the key decision makers on what's Power Automate, what is this Lego box story that we are talking about, who are our customers, who are we targeting, what are the tool sets do they have. And if they can empower themselves by doing some lightweight training, so they'll have a better handle on sort of what's happening. And this is even before we go into the discover phase, which is around figuring out, hey, which process should I automate? How should I plan about building this automation and rolling it across my organization? And then once you have an idea as to what you're building, then you move on to sort of this design phase, which is, I say, what are your core first principles, or what are your core principles to define you as an organization? Like, what do you care about the most? Do you care about scale, security? So, and make sure sort of that is the essence of your automation as you're building, as you're reviewing code and stuff. And then you sort of go about building as a next step, which is the part that we all like, right? We're builders. So how do you develop your cloud flows, desktop flows, your human in the loop, and how do you take care of these core concerns around making sure that your automation is going to run reliably and stuff. And once you're done building, and that's where you see a lot of this model of a fusion team where businesses can build and they'll work with pro developers to deploy and manage these bots as unattended or attended. And so from a deployment perspective, what are some of the key areas that you need to think about? And then once you've deployed and they're running in production, then from a COE perspective, how do you make sure that you have the right guardrails in place from a security and governance perspective, so that like users are not shooting themselves in the foot and the bots are not doing something that they were not supposed to do, and you have a good way of having those alerts in place and uh, acting upon those alerts. And once you've then sort of gone through that cycle where everything is now running at scale, then the next task is like, how then do you upskill the other workers that you have so that they can sort of start to be more productive over there? So it's all about like in this whole arc, like how do you start, how do you discover, plan, design, build, and deploy, and then scale from an enterprise perspective, both from a security perspective and then upskilling your employees at large. Um, and then, this is what we're going to talk about as an arc that we see a lot of customers go through. And, you might see yourself fit in some of the places and in some of the other places, but some might not be relevant for you, and which is okay. Like this is just a sort of general stab at what the automation landscape is going to look like for today.
Cool. Good. All right. So I feel like we have covered the idea of what we're hoping to get across in the series. And so let's go ahead and end part 1 here. Unless anyone else has any final comments to add. No?
I think one thing I was just going to say is to Pranav's last point there. Like, this is one of those things where you can choose what makes the most sense for your organization. And we see organizations approaching this, differently. Sometimes it's very centralized in terms of how they want to go ahead and build and deploy their automations. Other times it's more about enablement, right? And establishing guardrails to really unlock the potential of the platform in order to scale this out. We do have customers that have hundreds of RPA developers, and those come from business backgrounds. And so part of it is just how do we ensure that we can manage this thing, because we're trying to enable so many people. And these are essentially the building blocks that allow you to go ahead and do that.
Exactly, and I think that's important. Those are building blocks, and from our best of knowledge, what we have experienced now through the years, from both a low code, no code perspective, but also deploying those solutions and automations across enterprises, right? So it's really not prescriptive. It's more buckets from the most frequently asked topics, let's say, within those domain, like deploy and manage, secure, and governance on. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we've covered what we're going to cover in depth in each section. We've given you an overview and what we hope to get across. And so we will see you in the next video.